Bill Kristol is with us this morning. He is with the Weekly Standard, heads up the Weekly Standard, and we go to the phones. Jersey City, New Jersey.
Hello?
Morning.
Good morning. I'm actually a Democrat who really, I don't dislike Bush, but I disagree with everything that's happened so far in the administration. I'm a Democrat who watched the World Trade Center fall from across the river. We were right across the river from the entire scene, and it was very devastating. I lost friends there, and I never understood why we went to war with Iraq, because it was never the reason behind going to Iraq didn't make sense to me because of the terrorism, and that Saddam was not really involved with al-Qaeda. But my question is, you are the author of the New American Century. You're part of one of the authors of the New American Century. I'm wondering, what was your plan when you wrote this, and how has Iraq, this whole situation in Iraq, transpired for you? Has it worked out for you the way you've planned it?
Yeah, I mean, I think the caller's referring to the project from the New American Century, which I'm chairman of, a small foreign policy think tank, which puts out various reports and studies and conferences and the like.
And it's gotten a lot of attention recently.
Got a lot of attention recently. It's probably given a little more credit than it deserves for sort of articulating the Bush foreign policy and making some of the arguments for the Bush doctrine before September 11th, 2001. Bob Kagan and I edited a book in 2000 called Present Dangers, which argued that the world is a very dangerous place, that either America leads and confronts these dangers early, or they'll come and hit us much later when they're much harder to control. And I think 9/11 in some ways was unfortunately a vindication of some of our worries and some of our fears. In terms of Iraq, it's a mixed bag in terms of my expectations. Some things have gone much better than I expected. Others have been tougher, including some of the stabilizing the post-war situation against the Ba'athist holdovers and some of the terrorists. On the other hand, there hasn't been the massive religious and ethnic warfare that everyone warned about. This huge bulk of southern Iraq has been incredibly stable, and the Shia have been incredibly responsible, I would say, for all the talk here before the war about how these people were religious fanatics who would be, turning on each other and turning on us within weeks or months. One of their leaders is killed in a horrible truck bomb, and they have a 400,000-person march, totally peaceful, totally responsible, really kind of an amazing thing. Up north, where the Kurds are, everyone has feared great turmoil there. That's been quite quiet as well. The Sunni triangle in the center has been a security problem, first of all. And secondly, on the reconstruction side, I just don't think we poured in as much money and as many people as we should have, as quickly as we should have, to get it going. But I think we're beginning to fix that now. I would say, though, that the world is a better place. Certainly, Iraq is a better place because Saddam has been removed. I do think he was a threat to us and to others in the region, certainly. And I think there's a good chance that the Middle East will be a better place if we stay to it in Iraq. If we stay the course, if we suppress the counterinsurgency, if we help Iraq get on its feet and establish a decent, federalist, democratic form of government, that will be an extremely important moment for the Middle East and will be well worth the cost in treasure and the cost in lives, I think. I mean, many people, it's a legitimate point of view to say, look, Iraq doesn't seem to have been directly concerned with 9/11. What are we doing there? 9/11 was done by a discrete group, by al-Qaeda. Let's just concentrate on that. And that is, I think, the basic democratic point of view about the war on terror. Bush has a different view, and I agree with Bush on this, which is you really need to think about this war as a general global war, really, on terror and terrorist groups and states that sponsor terrorism. That simply getting rid of the particular group that killed Americans, so that's terribly important to do, doesn't really solve the problem if another state is sponsoring terrorists who will come and do something like this 2 or 5 or 8 years from now, and maybe with worse weapons, incidentally. So I agree with Bush's understanding that this is a big war, not just a retaliation against a particular attack. But that's one of the things that's going to be debated, I think, in 2004, because I think the caller expressed quite well what is, basically the sensible, I don't agree with it, but the kind of serious democratic critique of Bush's foreign policy. Is there really one global war on terror, or was that a mistake? Did that lead us into doing things that we shouldn't have done? Did that give us too ambitious an agenda for the Middle East? Are we going to get stuck in a quagmire in Iraq, et cetera, et cetera?
Let's get to Fayetteville, Arkansas. Good morning.
Good morning, C-SPAN. I see you've got the chicken hawk on again this morning. Anyway, my question for the chicken hawk is, where are the weapons of mass destruction? You know, you can spin this any way you want to, but we went to war, and the bottom line is finding and destroying weapons of mass destruction. Prior to the war, we had Kristol, Daniel Pipes, Frank Gaffney, Richard Pearl, David Kay, all telling us they knew specific locations for these things, these weapons. And then you come up with stories like hiding botulinum in a refrigerator or burying a nuclear weapon under a rose bush in the backyard. You know, the whole world knows these were lies. Why do you keep pursuing this charade? Answer that question. Where are the weapons of mass destruction? Now, you all said you knew where they were at. Now, please tell us. Thank you a lot.
I never said I knew where they were at. I said what the president said, what President Clinton said, what UN inspectors said, which is Saddam had not accounted for weapons we know he had. We certainly know he had weapons of mass destruction. We know he used weapons of mass destruction. We know that UN inspectors, not the horrible Bush administration, not neoconservatives, the UN inspectors went in the 90s and found weapons of mass destruction. We know that he refused to account for those weapons that he had, for those chemical agents, biological agents that he had produced, that he had never destroyed. We know that he didn't cooperate with the inspectors. We know that when the inspectors came back in, he didn't cooperate with them, and now we know from David Kay that he hid over a dozen labs from these inspectors, that he had an ongoing weapons program. So I have nothing to apologize for. I assumed, and many of us assumed, the president assumed, that there might be more actual caches of weapons than there turned out to be. We'll see if we don't find some, incidentally, in the future. Kay is not finished doing his job, but we don't know about that. But look, to the degree that I expected certain things that didn't turn out, I'm happy to say that I was wrong. Do I think the war was not justified? No, I think it was absolutely justified.
San Francisco.
Yeah, Mr. Kristol, I'm calling in about the PNAC, Project for a New American Century.
Caller, we have a very bad telephone line. If you want to ask a quick question, we'll try to understand it.
Actually, to make it quick, I'm just curious as to how much of what PNAC does is actually implemented into the White House. I noticed, I did some research and I saw that you guys wanted like a $70 to $100 or $100 billion increase in the budget. It so happens we get $87 billion. With all, and there's other things considered. I was just wondering what you guys actually, or how much say you guys do have that actually gets inputted into the White House.
Well, PNAC, just to explain to the viewers, is the Project for the New American Century,
right,
which I'm chairman of. We called 3-4 years ago, we said, in fact, Bob Kagan and I wrote a piece in Foreign Affairs in 1996 saying we thought we were underinvesting in defense, that we had let the peace dividend after the Cold War, we'd enjoyed too much of a peace dividend, that the world remained a dangerous place, that we would need to have a bigger military, we'd need to spend more on defense, and we said, I think at the time, $60 to $100 billion more. We're not actually at the levels I think we need to be at in terms of defense spending, in terms of the size of the military. General Shinseki said a couple of months ago when he retired that we had a 12-division strategy for a 10-division army, and I think we're seeing that in Iraq. And now we have to mobilize reserves and National Guard, and I think we're stretched awfully thin. So I don't apologize for thinking that we need a higher defense budget, and having argued this for quite a while. The administration is asking, I think, $65 billion to pay for keeping these troops in Iraq for the next year, which is necessary. That's not an investment, unfortunately, in our future. That's not buying new weapons. It's not increasing the size of the force. It's simply paying to have the force, you know, for the gasoline, for the force to go on patrols, and for the ammunition that's used, and for all that's needed to keep the force on a war or semi-war footing. So I still think we're actually underinvesting in defense. The good news is we're a wealthy country. Defense spending now is a little over 4% of gross domestic product. It can be a lot higher. It was 6.5% in the mid-'80s. It was 4.5% when Clinton took over in 1993. So we're still not spending very much on defense by historical standards. And I think if you think the world is a dangerous place, as I do, and I think as President Bush does, if you think we're going to have global responsibilities and global challenges, this isn't the last war, unfortunately, we're going to have to fight in the next 10 or 20 years. They're going to be not just wars, but little operations and anti-terrorist operations, peacekeeping operations. If you think we have to do all this, if you think we have to keep troops in Asia to stabilize the situation there, it probably takes a little bit more spending, another $30, $40 billion, I should think, on top of the current defense spending, to really just be confident that we're doing what we need to do.
Fayetteville, Arkansas again.
Good morning.
Morning.
Now
Different
that
caller.
What's that?
No, I just said different caller, just so
Okay.
people understand.
All right. now that we've had the kind of preemptive war that neoconservatives have been advocating for years, I think it's worth pointing out that we've had a long-standing policy of preemption. It's just been covert until recently. In the 50s, we assassinated Guatemala's democratically elected president. When a man named Mobutu assassinated the Congo's democratically elected president, we sent him billions of dollars in economic aid after he had done that. There's actually a long list, and with the current preemptive war, we've made allies with Turkey, who has killed thousands of their own Kurdish civilians, just like Hussein did. We're allies with Saudi Arabia, who's known to have stronger terrorist ties than Hussein did. So my question is this: how can a preemptive war doctrine possibly be compatible with our own democratic principles when it's always, both in the past and now, contradicted the very values we're supposedly fighting for? So thank you.
I mean, it would be nice, in all honesty, if one of the callers who's anti-war, and that's a legitimate point of view, they can think the war was unwise, at least acknowledge that we have liberated 22 million Iraqis from a horrible, gruesome, brutal tyranny. Now they can say, well, America at times had sided with Saddam or even helped him a little bit. That's true. That doesn't, maybe we were wrong to do so. Maybe there were different strategic concerns at the time. But in any case, we have acted to really remove a horrible, brutal tyrant. That in itself is a good thing. Now, one can still say it's risky, it's imprudent, we should be doing it elsewhere, there are other priorities. Those are all fair things to debate. But I would want to make that point. I make no apologies for to the degree that Iraq was a preemptive war, don't think we have to apologize for that. There are cases in the 20th century where it would have been better to act preemptively. Are we proud that we stayed out of World War II until we were attacked by Japan? Are we proud that we didn't do more to stop Hitler from coming to power or conquering his neighbors or launching the Second World War? I'm not. Are we proud that we stayed out in Rwanda or that we didn't act more earlier against Milosevic in the Balkans? I'm not. So I don't think the problem with America has been that we've been racing off to war everywhere around the world. If anything, the problem has been that we've been a little reticent, a little slow to intervene at times where an earlier intervention could have saved a lot of lives and would have actually prevented things from spinning out of control.
Bay Cliff, Texas.
Yes, I'd like to mention one thing. You said that President Bush didn't want to fight this war on the cheap. That's a policy he'd best give America and make us the ones that get the cheap. And going back to the Democratic National Party being so readily vehement against Mr. Bush, perhaps it's because they realize that they represent the massive number of people who have lost their jobs, who have lost their health care, and perhaps lost their faith in this great society. What have you to say about that?
No, I think a lot of Democrats think the Bush administration's policies have been wrong, have been misguided, tax cuts were a mistake, money should go into health care, et cetera, et cetera. I think objectively speaking, the economy, given that Bush inherited a recession and the bursting of the dot-com bubble, the economy is about as good as we could have expected, frankly, at this point. And I think we're having a decent recovery now, and I expect we'll get some job growth now in the next few months out of this recovery. But, I'm not an economic forecaster, and it's not clear to me that it would be that different if Gore were president, either that much better or that much worse, frankly. So, Democrats have different policy views than Republicans. That's why we have elections. The country's pretty evenly divided. It certainly has been in the last few elections. It looks right now as if it is looking ahead to 2004.
Next is Montrose, Colorado.
Yes, good morning. Mr. Kristol, I wish you would tell who delivered the weapons systems to Saddam Hussein, who gave him the helicopters and who gave him the gas. I mean, going around the world and saying there's nations of evil and we're the good guys, and we wonder why North Korea wants a nuclear bomb. It's the only deterrent we had for years. It was called MAD, Mutual Assured Destruction. It worked for years, and these countries saw it working. And when you go around, when you frighten other nations at calling them nations of evil, and of course they're going to be wanting to bomb. And the scariest thing to me over there is that Pakistan and India have bombs, and they say Israel has 30 of them, and yet we want to deny countries that we call evil one bomb. And I just think this religious war will go on and on and on, and I think we're stuck in a mire again Vietnam. I served in the Second World War, and I think this is outrageous. The politicians know now without the draft, they'll never have to send their own kids. And I understand there's only one congressman that has a son in the service. Now that's something to talk about right there.
Who is it,
But,
caller? Do you know? Do you remember who it is?
What's that?
Do you remember which member of Congress it is?
No, I don't remember
Okay.
which member, but I do remember Mathis on his show talking to college students, and he said, how many of you would stand up right now and fight for your country? Almost the whole college guys there stood up. Then he said, how many of you would put your education on deferment and go now? 3 of them stood up.
Thanks, caller.
Yeah, I think Senator Johnson of
Senator Johnson,
of
yeah.
South Dakota's son is, I think was in Iraq actually, or is in Iraq. I don't know. I mean, many other members of Congress, to be fair, either have little kids or don't have kids or have older kids, some of whom have been in the military, and many, of course, of them have served in the military themselves. Anyway, there are evil regimes in the world. It's not just us calling people evil. And North Korea wasn't motivated to seek nuclear weapons because George Bush gave a speech and used the phrase axis of evil. God knows Saddam wasn't motivated to use weapons, chemical weapons, over 15 years ago because George Bush became president in 2001. North Korea is a really horrible regime. I mean, really way up there in the list of truly evil and despicable regimes. Starved over 1 billion of its own people. Unfortunately, it's a hard one to remove, and precisely because we let them get too far in acquiring nuclear weapons. I mean, generally, the problem of nuclear proliferation is a real problem. No one has easy answers to it. I wish Pakistan weren't a nuclear country, but now it is, and we have to figure out how to deal with that. But I think Bush is right, that we can't just sit back and sort of decide, well, you know, the world was reasonably safe with us having nuclear weapons, and Britain and France and the Soviet Union and China for the last, most of the last half century. And so we can just sit back and let every regime in the world just chug ahead and get nuclear weapons. The degree to which you really could have arms races and you could have very, very dangerous situations, and ultimately these weapons would get used in certain parts of the world is I think, underappreciated by lots of people.
What's your subscription now for the Weekly Standard?
The numbers?
Uh-huh.
I think it says about 75,000 in the new issue. There's one of those little publisher statements you have to put in every 6 months. I'm not sure why, but legally it's required. But the magazine's doing well, and it's a lot of online readers. I think 1 million unique viewers a month come to look at it online. You can get a daily Standard, a couple of short pieces every day for free, and about a quarter or a third of the issue for free. But obviously, you need to subscribe to get the benefit of reading all the brilliant articles and excellent cultural commentary and fine editorials in the Weekly Standard.
We were reading this morning, a little bit earlier this morning from the Wall Street Journal, a piece about the Los Angeles Times losing 1,000 subscribers because of their report last week on Arnold Schwarzenegger. Now, 1,000 versus how many they have is a pretty small percentage. Have you ever lost subscribers because of something you've written?
Sure. We started Labor Day 1995. The Republicans had taken over the Congress. Gingrich was riding high. Most of our initial subscribers were obviously Republican sympathizers, conservatives, anti-Clinton, pro-Gingrich. In December of '95, Clinton decided, just 3 months after we'd started going, Clinton decided to intervene in Bosnia. We supported that. We thought that was the right thing to do. Most Republicans in Congress and probably around the country opposed it, mostly because they disliked Clinton, I think, and distrusted Clinton, not because they were necessarily against getting involved in Bosnia. But we supported Clinton strongly and chastised congressional Republicans for kind of irresponsible neo-isolationism. We then attacked Buchanan a few weeks later. His presidential campaign had just taken off in New Hampshire in '96. And between those two things, we lost a decent chunk of our initial subscribers, but it all worked out okay.
Bill Kristol of the Weekly Standard, thanks very much for joining us this morning.
Thanks very much.